She could feel the nervous tension undoing her efforts, threatening to thwart the stiff upper lip that was to have been her last resort. Needing a moment, she rolled her eyes away from him, blinked up into the apricot clouds that crowned a pale lavender sky. It could have been any other spring morning, except that it wasn't. She swallowed past the lump in her throat, her gaze swinging down again to clap solidly on the tall, dark-haired, square-jawed fellow in front of her. He was a perfect melding of his father's rough masculinity and his mother's classical features, but he was like neither of them. It would be a long while before he came home again. She refused to even consider the possibility that he might not. Olive had managed mostly to ignore the sharp nip in the air on her ride to the village, but the chill that swept over her now seeped through her jumper and goose-flesh skin, straight to her bones. She tipped her head down quickly and scuffed her feet over the gravelled road. She'd been fiercely proud when George had joined up, prouder still when he'd graduated from the elementary flying training school. Now he was being shipped off for training in service flying. All the things he'd need to know for piloting an aeroplane in war. It was the last step before he'd earn his sergeant's stripes and Royal Air Force wings. Olive beamed at him, clenching her jaw to hold the smile in place as her eyes ranged over his face, urgently memorizing the deep dimple in his left cheek, the snapping blue of his eyes, and the 2 tiny pale white scars on his temple, which served as markers of a long-ago cautionary tale. The dutiful Watson to her high-handed Sherlock, George had chivalrously let her run herd on him for the better part of their still young lives. After today, she'd no longer have a part in his adventures. He was leaving her behind, and that was intolerable. Her older brother, Lewis, had been gone for over a year now, serving as a British liaison officer in Greece. They hadn't had a letter from him in 3 months, and Olive couldn't look at the little framed photograph of him, dashing in cricket whites, posing on the village green, without succumbing to a crushing feeling of helplessness. Forcibly tamping down the negative emotions, she lifted her chin, even at the risk of exposing the quiver in her lower lip. There'd be time for a good wallow later. Right now, George needed one last knuckling under before he stepped beyond her reach. "Why can't you take her?" she demanded. "This is the real thing, Olive. The War Office. Official business. Packing a stowaway." He eyed the basket with exasperation. "Is surely grounds for an unpleasant sort of punishment." Olive's lips twisted with nostalgia. George could always be depended upon to muster a cautious, sensible objection to every impulsive suggestion. Who would temper her wilder impulses while he was gone? She propped the basket under her arm and released the catch. A rounded grey head poked itself curiously into the conversation, as if to say, who would dare object? George's shoulders slumped farther, and Olive grinned encouragingly. "It's not as if the RAF is anti-pigeon," she reminded him. "Quite the opposite. These birds have been carrying messages since the beginning of the war, selflessly doing their bit. Before that, it was the Great War, and before that—" "Save it," he said dryly. "Poppins is a racer. She's trained for this sort of thing." Olive pressed. "Release her wherever the fancy strikes. The farther away the better, and she'll fly right home." She flashed a broad smile, with no one the wiser. He let his gaze roll away, a hint that he was caving. "But Poppins is a civilian," he said, his tone no longer quite as adamant. "For now," Olive countered, her brows lifting defiantly. "She